And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, you all see it? So Krypton check-in, I know we distributed the testnet for the Daemon Technologies mining. We made it past 1,000 blocks this past week, so that's cool for the first time.
Yeah, we made it past 2,000 blocks actually just before the reset today.
Oh, damn. Nice. Yeah. I have a few issues that I'm about to talk about in the board that will improve the chain quality for the case where you have lots of netted miners. So I can get that out probably today. We don't need a chain reset for it, but it will significantly help out people who are participating in this mining competition. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, and right now we do have an issue with logging, I think, with the slog PR. Debug logs are no longer working in production for some reason. So we're still trying to figure out what's happening there.
Is it showing up in the file?
Doesn't look like it, although like when I run it locally, it does show up. Debug logs do show up on my file, but the prefix is truncated.
Does the production image like pipe things through T?
That's what I was trying to check with JYLE. I think we were doing some piping, and that's why I was thinking that the prefix might be the issue. But
it might be just standard error versus standard out.
But you would see nothing if you were failing to capture standard error.
Not necessarily. Like, I don't know. Info logs might default to standard out, and then debug might be going to standard error.
Bizarre.
I think that I think that there is some sort of like weirdness with like standard logging outputs where they log to different standard error or standard out depending on the log type. So that I suspect is what's going on.
Maybe I'm showing my age here, being an old Unix head, but usually, like that's the first time I've ever heard of logging infrastructure intentionally using two different streams for different log outputs.
I think traditional Unix logging does like info to standard out and error to standard error.
I thought traditional Unix logging used either syslog or just didn't print anything, or did all standard error.
Anyways,
we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we can keep going. I just wanted to flag that so people are aware.
Alrighty. Let's go ahead and get started on the board then. Review or approved. Matt, I think this is good to go. Unless something else that you want to try first.
No, I think it's good. I think Aaron just approved it.
Sweet. Before we actually execute the rollout though, onto the production stacks nodes, we should probably test the migration early, like just to make sure that we know, or at least have a good idea like how long it will take and that we can get the snapshot that we need. So do that easily?
Yeah, for sure. We've already had discussions with DevOps where we're probably going to be running this export process just like on a 2-hour interval constantly for a long time.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll help a lot because we really want to make sure that this will work when we do it for reals. So that's awesome that you guys have that set up.
We took the situation of Access 2.0 launching on like Christmas night and everyone has COVID as the benchmark.
Love it. The dead man switch. All right, let's go ahead and look at reviews in progress. Pascal, do you want to talk a bit about this?
Sure, I haven't seen if there's any comments from this morning, but yeah, I was trying to implement the new read-only for traits. And I bumped into the code that was implemented in the RPC for call read, and it looked like easy enough to make it call public function. So that's what I did. It was actually not the big thing. So I think I need reviews unless someone has done anything today.
That's cool. Yeah, that's something we definitely would like because not every function you would want to call for the RPC is going to be read only. So
right. It turned out it was just changing a Boolean and then checking the error is different, but I just check the cost function, and if it did any writes, that it's not a read-only call.
Aaron, I think you can speak more to this. Do you know what happens to any state that does get written?
Should get discarded with using the function, if I understand correctly, the function that it's using. But
Yeah, it should get just discarded.
Sweet. And doesn't hit disk or anything, right?
No. I mean, that's sort of up to SQLite's implementation. I think that we use transaction unrolling.
it's used by many other pieces of the code that
Yes.
that really need. If something is broken in that function, a lot of things would be broken.
Yeah. Things are very problematic. But yeah, it uses the not transactions, whatever, SQLite rollback support. So if SQLite is writing transactions to the database before they're rolled back, then there could be some writes to disk, but I don't think it does.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is there like a concurrency issue here? Like, could you have multiple transactions scheduled in arbitrary orders against a SQLite database that might not be unwound in the right order?
I don't think so.
No race conditions or anything?
No.
If that function doesn't work, a lot of other things would be also broken because that function is used.
But that's not really true though. The problem is that that function is used primarily in sequential code where you're processing one blockchain transaction after another blockchain transaction. But if it's available through the RPC interface, then the schedule of calls against the database is basically arbitrary. Like, what if I have 1,000? What if I spin up 1,000 concurrent read-write requests? Would all the transactions unwind properly? Would the save points, the order in which the save points unwound, not clobber any pending save points?
I mean, that's a good question. I assume that it was.
Right, we'll want to test this.
If I didn't check if there were any existing key tests already for this, but
right, there wouldn't be any existing tests right now, just because we are guaranteed that the save point unrolling will happen in reverse order of the save point creation by virtue of the fact that this code is only used in sequentially processing blockchain transactions. So I'm just going to add the addendum to this. I'm just going to make sure to test this adequately. Let's see. GitHub.
Because you're already using another RPC call.
Yeah, it also, like, each of these invocations has its own SQLite connection.
Because
And
the
save points
POX
are local to your connection.
the POX info is also using that call to execute some calls in the contract. Although it's calling read-only probably, but functions.
But Aaron, I'm not sure that save points are specific to the connection. I think they're specific. I think that they're globally scoped in the database.
So question about that, the HTTP conversations are being processed sequentially though, right?
They are, but they process at different rates depending on how fast or slow the packets arrive. So HTTP requests can race each other. And SQLite will still serialize IO operations. But the problem is that if you have request A followed by request B, and request A makes a save point, and request B makes a save point, and then request A finishes and unwinds, does it also destroy request B's save point? Because if that happens, then request A can cause request B to fail.
So what's the best test to try to make 2 or more transactions at the same time that should roll back and do it hundreds of times and see if that actually breaks anything?
Yeah, try using an HTTP load tester.
No, I think that if we actually think that save points are not thread safe, like we need a test that just creates out of sync save points. Like that should be a very simple test. But there's no reason that we should be trying to like randomly uncover this behavior.
Just like SQLite call, I mean?
Yeah, just like open up 2 different, like one transaction that does some things. It uses the same save point name as the other transaction, have the other transaction roll back, and you should still be able to confirm the first transaction. Because otherwise we're like depending on our like random testing to like use this, you randomly figure out that it's using the same save point name and all those things. Like,
Yeah, I agree. This is something that's eminently testable. Like, can you unwind save points in a different order than the reverse of which they were created and have everything work out?
Yeah, I see. I can add it, see if I can add something, or even look if there's anything in the SQLite code base to actually test that.
I know that there are definitely a battery of tests for verifying that transactions unwind correctly or that they confirm correctly, and I bet a few of them could be extended to do this.
Okay.
Cool. So let's go ahead and try that, and then we can review it.
All right.
Awesome. Reed, I think I just saw you send a bunch of commits against this, the Rust code to inspect clarity code, or was that the other one?
No, that's correct. Yeah, so I just pushed a bunch of commits to the draft PR. So at this point, I'm just kind of like, a bunch of tests are failing because these new clarity cost functions aren't being loaded into the cost tracker that I assume is being used in a myriad of tests throughout the code base. So I need to figure out how to get that to work. But I don't think too much of this code will need to change because of that. So I think this is ready to be given a first glance, I would say. And I'd be happy to do some sort of PR review if that would be useful. Maybe I could put something on the calendar for tomorrow or Wednesday.
Yeah, cool. Why don't we go ahead and do that?
Yeah, sounds good. And yeah, I plan on kind of cleaning this PR up a little bit and making it a little bit more sensible and easy to review, just in terms of the way that the code is broken down commit by commit.
Awesome. Yeah, you want to go ahead and set up a calendar invite?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that right now.
Awesome. POX sunsetting. I've taken a brief look at this, but I haven't given it a full review yet, Aaron. But you were saying you were working on verifying that burns can go to the op return still?
no, I updated the PR and tests to use the op return. So
does it work with the Bitcoin reg test node?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So I'll try to have this reviewed in the next couple of days or so.
Cool.
Ability to build a chain anchored to Bitcoin testnet. I apologize that I have not had a chance to look at this week, Ludo.
That's fine. I actually still have to revisit a few things on this PR. Like, I think you've already made a bunch of feedbacks that I haven't been addressed yet. Okay. But yeah, so I've been trying to minimize interruptions with the Atlas project. So hopefully I'll be able to open a PR on Atlas tomorrow and then go back to this week.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to that. All right, Pascal, this is the issue with running tenure only matching stacks blocks is available. Is this fixed now? Like, I know that I've worked on this too.
I think it's mostly fixed, although I don't know that the current PR guarantees one of the things that it's trying to check, which namely that you've received the stack blocks for the current or the last known burn block. It's working a lot better. But there's still the risk of not getting blocks back from the actual miner. So that pull request would not mine a block if you haven't received it, as opposed to create a fork.
Right. I see what you mean.
So that's. But even though if all the miners stop doing that and no block is received, then nobody would be mining. So it still needs a fallback, or at least if it hasn't happened for a configurable number of blocks, someone would need to mine again, or decide that yes, we need to do it anyway. Otherwise, the chain would be stuck.
Because that's what I basically addressed in PR of 1980, because what it did was it if it noticed a new stacks block had arrived since it last tried to mine in the current tenure, it would just remine a stacks block and invalidate its block commit with a replace by fee transaction. So it implements that recovery path there. It will
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yes. If it eventually arrives, but if it never arrives, which seems to be the case in some cases, and I saw that you created some new issues, especially for the natted.
Yeah, there's still a problem where
from some of the natted miners that can't send their block for some reason, and that has been the case for a long time. But now that a lot of other things have been fixed, that becomes more prominent.
Okay, I'm gonna try to have a PR.
So I think this PR, we just need to not put it on ice just yet, but once the natted issues are gone, then we can see if there's still something that can help on that.
All right, I have a PR for that probably the end of today or so. I'm just trying to make a.
All right, sounds good. Then I can double check, and there's maybe some things I can simplify in that PR as well.
Awesome.
Especially because the mining too early, that thing seems to be working a lot better now. So I don't need to have code for that.
Moving on then, the limiting broadcast for duplicate message payloads. I have this working locally, but I need to have more tests for it. Matt, this is part of the same PR that's been reviewer approved, right?
Yeah, actually the first PR that addressed this was merged in, so I think we can close this issue.
Oh, sweet. And this is the overarching issue, right, Reed? Like we've already talked about the status of your current PR.
Yep.
Cool. Have you touched SIP00 SIP yet with the newly working code?
No, not yet. I'll probably have to make some changes there.
Okay. And Ludo, you just said we we're going to have a PR for Atlas network and zone file replication tomorrow sometime.
Yep.
Awesome. Aaron, this is this in progress, or is this not started yet? The on Bitcoin stacking operations.
It's in progress.
Cool. Think you'll get a PR this week sometime, or?
Yeah, I'm hopeful to open one tomorrow. We'll see.
Cool. I'll go ahead and sign up milestone then. All right. Just look through the new issues real quick. I opened a flurry of P2P issues last night. They basically cover different aspects of a PR that I'm working on that basically some background over this weekend and starting really on Friday when DeWalker helpfully shared his log that showed that his natted miner was not sending blocks that were getting incorporated into the chain state, like not even on a fork anywhere. I spun up my own mining node just to try to figure out if I could duplicate this reliably. And this uncovered a handful of kind of subtle issues in the peer-to-peer state machine scheduling. For example, there's an off by one error in blocks available message handling that can cause a broadcasted block to get delayed, possibly by a whole 10-year. So if I'm a native miner, for example, and I send a block and it reaches a public node, that public node will send a blocks available to all of its neighbors as it should, but it will be for the next sortition as opposed to the current sortition. So what will happen is everybody else who wakes up having received that blocks available message will do a full rescan of the chain state. And then when it wraps around, the last sortition it will consider is the one that I had originally meant for the blocks available to signify the arrival of that block for. And that rescan can take on north of a minute sometimes. So fixing this should speed up block propagation in practice. We hadn't been catching it in tests because the tests will still work. Like the wraparound will eventually cause a block that was announced through blocks available to be downloaded and replicated to all peers. It just doesn't happen in a timely fashion. This next test I'm working on right now is a request for an integration test to verify that if you spin up multiple netted miners and have a single public follower that does no mining, then the natted miners can still build a single chain with minimal number of forks just by using that follower as a relayer. So that blocks uploaded to the follower will get announced to downstream natted nodes and then pulled by those downstream natted nodes before the next sortition can happen. This is a small bug right here I just noticed in testing. Some tests had inexplicably started taking longer, and it turns out there's a bug in the way that we had handled throttling re-requests for blocks. Namely, if you request a block, that would cause a request for the associated microblock stream to be delayed by like a minute or so, because we don't try to re-request blocks that are already in flight. Fixing this problem is pretty straightforward. It's like a 2-line change and it goes away. This is a more subtle scheduling bug in the download state machine. In the peer-to-peer state machine right now, before we begin downloading blocks, the network code will try to do a rescan of all of its neighbors' block inventories, starting from the first sortition and ending at the chain tip. But when the download state machine wakes up and handles this new data, it only processes up to a configurable constant max in-flight requests. That's set to 5, I think. So what this means is that the network state machine has to do a full pass again through the inventory synchronization logic before the next 5 blocks will be requested. We don't really notice this when we run the node now because the inventory state synchronization system normally takes, like when there's 2,000 blocks, it can take up to like 30 seconds for an inventory synchronization to complete. But we don't notice it because the inventory synchronization state machine throttles itself down, so it only gets woken up once per sortition. But nevertheless, it's a bug. Like what should be happening is the download state machine should try to fetch as many blocks as it can before yielding control to the next stage in the peer-to-peer state machine. In doing so, if we don't do this, and this is actually how I noticed this, if there's a slow node, a node that takes a long time to send you its inventory packets, its inventory messages back, it can cause the downstream node fetching the inventory packets to go a long time between block downloads. It will eventually catch up, but it'll just be a lot slower. And this is a related issue here. I'm making sure the download state machine is active for a minimum amount of time. I've also been doing some work on the POX chain sync watchdog to make sure that before the watchdog allows the next burn chain reward cycle to be downloaded, the peer-to-peer state machine will have had to have completed a single inventory synchronization. The reason for this is that, again, due to that slow node sending slow inventory messages back to me, I had noticed that the POX watchdog on my node could advance to the next reward cycle before the first reward cycle I finished downloading, which in turn caused the node to correctly unwind the last reward cycle it downloaded and redo the prior reward cycle now that it has the new anchor block. But ideally that shouldn't happen. At least it shouldn't happen due to there just simply being a lot of inventory messages to process. And that in turn made it somewhat slower for my node to boot up once we had gotten past like 1,000 sortitions to go through.
Hey, Jude, I had a quick question.
Yes.
What's the best way to sort of get a sense of, for microblocks to be working end to end? How much work is remaining? Like, is there like either a document or a label that I can look at that gives us, right now it's kind of hard to get a sense of where we are.
I can go ahead and add a label. All of these P2P issues, you can consider blocking on this.
Yeah. And then a kind of related question, like, are you discovering these like as you're in the process of like implementing and testing microblocks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just they're blocking issues because the problems that you're seeing here will also affect microblock replication. Because what you don't want to have happen, for example, is a really forky chain that causes most microblocks to just get lost.
Yeah.
I think Alex opened this right here. Update SIPs.
Yeah, I think
Go
we
ahead.
already, some of the changes, I think for PUX, for example, require maybe minor updates to SIP 007. Usually, I think we've been fairly disciplined in updating the SIPs along with the PRs that make changes to the behavior. So this is mostly a reminder. For context, next week, most teams within PBC are going to be spending some time dedicated on documentation. So this issue is, just a reminder that maybe next week, we can collectively just spend time reviewing some of the SIPs to make sure that, they reflect what is currently implemented to the best that we can. It should be relatively low lift to do that.
Yeah, that's next week, you said, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go ahead and put it into this sprint then. Live stacking calculator bounty.
I think we can ignore this. I can follow up with Tim and I guess it's Peter Toth maybe separately. I mean, regardless of the boundary, this issue doesn't belong in this repository. So
Sounds
I
good.
can follow
up. I took a look at this issue. This is just a build time warning. It'll be fixed as part of my PR. I think I actually introduced this. Doesn't affect correctness. It's just this particular value is only used in a debug path that gets compiled out if you're not building a debug release.
I think it's just never read.
It is read, but it's only read inside of code that doesn't get compiled in the debug release.
Oh, I thought it's read in code that that updates it. Like this is the compiler being really clever, I think. Like it's doing like unrolling.
Yeah, but it is being read though. It's being read inside of a debug macro.
Oh.
So I'm not,
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't quite understand why it's saying that because it's clearly being read somewhere. The only explanation I can think of is if that code just is not considered by the analyzer. Frieder had an interesting idea of using DNS names as contract address aliases. This would be something that would have to live inside of the Clarity VM if implemented. Otherwise, you would have to have a routine, like a Clarity routine that could carry out the name to contract address resolution and then somehow use that as a contract call. Is that even possible?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the fact that BNS names can expire for me is it's weird to use these things on chain, and I think it can lead to undesired results. I'm not sold just because of the fact that names can expire and contracts can end up doing different things depending on the expiration date.
That's a good point. Do you want to add the comment to Frieder's post on that, Leo?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, initially thought it made sense mostly just from a UI perspective when you use something like the Explorer, but not for contracts to be able to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
that's
that would not have any kind of side effects. But if contract could use it, yeah, sure. But
yeah, like there can be I could see that being totally fine. Like names could just list. You could use BNS to help like developer tools.
right, exactly.
But the Clarity VM itself couldn't use a BNS name to resolve to a contract address.
Right. That's what my understanding of what this could be.
Yeah, that would make sense. Dan, I think you're on the call. Do you want to talk just a bit about the faucet bug?
Which one are we on? Which faucet bug?
We're on 1986. The faucet is inadequate stacking testing.
Yeah, it's just the current, or at least most recent testnet was requiring 83 million stacks as a min for stacking, and then the faucet was only offering up 3 million at a time. So in order to test stacking, we were having to either go to PSQ's faucet or request from the kind of quote unquote official faucet 30 times.
I see. Yeah, that's kind of
request to enable like a single more stacks in the with the stacking param.
DeWalker, do you know if we have a path forward on this?
I mean, either way, it doesn't seem like an issue with this repository. So I would maybe like I can move this to the Slacks blockchain API repo. That's where the faucet lives. And then Matt, if you're on the call, is the calculation in the faucet like static, or does it actually use the information in the POX endpoint?
I think it's hard coded right now. I don't think the endpoint was available at the time, but we can easily change it to just fetch from that endpoint.
Okay, let me just move this issue to the Stacks blockchain API repo.
We may want to have like two endpoints for this, like one to get just a normal amount for testing and one to do stacking, because I don't know how much.
We already have that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, or rather it's a single endpoint, but to request amount for stacking, you need a special parameter, and the default is small amounts.
Right, and the issue was even with the parameter, we weren't getting a decent amount for testing.
Gotcha. So yeah, this would be an issue for the Blockstack API. All right, cool. I think we're at the end of the this week's issues. I recognize the POX endpoint time to the next cycle issue. Backlog, real quick. Reed has already spoken about this and where he's at on this. I've been working on the Poison microblock support for Stacks microblocks. It's going all right, but in order to adequately test this, like beyond unit tests, I need to have the peer network code working in a decent place. And once we have these issues up here fixed, I can resume work on the microblock code. Other things. Do you want to, this maybe shouldn't be in the backlog anymore, the off-chain name database. So I'm just going to move this to in progress. Aaron, do you want to put the, I know that you're working on the on Bitcoin operations. Do you want to update the SIP for that as well when you send the PR?
I mean, I will update the SIP with the Bitcoin operations, but yeah, I'll update the SIP for all of our Bitcoin operations. Fine.
Up to you.
Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, you can add that onto my plate.
Okay.
Cool.
Long pending transaction. I can just ask him to retry. Because I think that transaction broadcasting has gotten more reliable in the past run. right. This is something I kind of want to get addressed sooner rather than later. The using the mean of minimum and median as weights over the past 6 Bitcoin blocks for considering sortition. Do you think we can do that? If not this sprint, maybe the next sprint?
Yeah.
I don't want to disrupt the current mining competition right now, but this is probably something, this is like definitely a mainnet blocker.
Yep.
So add that tag and put this into the next sprint. All right. Mempool should accept out of order nonces up to some limit. Do we, are we still working on this? Or is this something that's still a problem?
I think it's something that's still a problem.
Okay. This is also still a problem too, right, Aaron? The commitment's
Yeah,
not.
definitely.
Yeah, and even if you put transaction in the right order, there's a limit at 5. So when we have 10-minute blocks and people don't want to use the micro blocks, that might be limiting. But
I mean, either way, there would need to be some sort of rate limit.
yeah, but I think 5 is too low. That's more my point.
Yeah, you want to open a separate issue for that? We could consider bumping that to maybe
Sure.
15 or 20 or something. I think Bitcoin is at 25.
I never ran into that with Bitcoins, but I don't do enough Bitcoin transaction. But yeah, I'll open an issue.
Cool. We'll want to test it out just to make sure we don't end up killing the node by mistake or something. Do we want to talk a bit more about doing a BNS namespace registration contract? I know that it's been open for a while, but I'm not sure if this is a mainnet blocker or not. Like, can we defer this until after mainnet?
If we have a solid way to upgrade the BNS contract, then yes, I think we can do that post mainnet.
What we could do is we could say that we could deny free-for-all namespace registrations through a soft fork. And then we could say like all namespace registrations have to go through this particular contract or something like that. And miners could just enforce it.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think that we should maybe try this path, or yeah, just make sure that we are solid on this approach?
Yeah, I think
before mainnet.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Please finish.
No, I was done.
I didn't hear the end of what you said though. That's...
Oh, okay. So do you think that we should try this path? Like, should we do a dry run of this approach before mainnet so that we know that we can do it?
I'm not sure, because we would the ability to do a soft fork to filter out particular calls would require us to store extra information in the analysis database that we currently aren't storing. We talked about this in the last architecture meeting, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Upgrading smart contracts. So maybe we can just punt on this until, if we're happy with an upgrade mechanism, then maybe we don't need to worry about this at all. I'm just trying to figure out if this is a mainnet blocker or not.
Yeah, maybe we can take this discussion offline, and specifically, I mean, since we have a Stacks 2.1 on the horizon anyways, you know, that might be the other thing to think about.
That is true. Maybe we can defer until then.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're through the board now. And action items are to figure out why we're not seeing debug logs in production, and also to try to tag all the microblock related issues so we have a better time estimate on this.
Yeah, and similar to, I think, you know, how you put together, Jude, like the list of mainnet launch blockers. If you have kind of a similar list, whether it exists in a doc or another issue of, so just a set of like the current implementation plan for microblocks. If the set of tagged issues is complete with respect to what the implementation needs, maybe we don't need that list. But if not, and we need to create more issues, like having some sort of global view would be useful.
I can do that.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem. Any other action items? Questions, comments, concerns, anything?
Now on the debug logs, at least locally, we can see debug logs. I verified it. The DevOps team has verified it. So there's something going on with our production setup. So we'll keep looking at it.
Did you try twiddling with standard out and standard error to see if that was?
I checked the deployment config. It looks right to me. So there's something else going on.
So debug and info are both being sent to the same output stream?
Correct.
I see.
Yeah. I think by default, just everything is going to standard out.
Okay. Before it was all going to standard error. That might be why. Don't know though.
Anyways, I think JWL is trying to create a separate node where we can futz around with the logging configuration till we figure it out.
Alrighty. Cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen then.
All right. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what happens with the mining competition. I ran Pascal's stacks dump tool just now against my local miner, and I can see 15 miners, which is probably the most I've ever seen.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So we're in for an interesting week.
Woohoo.
All right.
All right, I'm going to stop
Thanks all.
recording.
Take care.